The buyer's journey has changed massively in the past year, and the way we approach customer experience must transform with it. But is your CRM technology really keeping up? Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. I am Belén Rodriguez Opperman, Marketing Specialist for SugarCRM, and I am thrilled to welcome you for today's session, Our Companies on the Cusp of a Customer Relationship Crisis. Today's agenda is packed with relevant CX insights, and by the end of this 45-minute session, you will be able to answer to the following crucial questions. First, what is the current state of CRM now? Second, what are the common roadblocks and blind spots creating sales friction and customer churn? And third, what are the signs that you should be aware of that could reveal if your CRM system is driving or stalling customer engagement and revenue? Without further ado, I am now honored to introduce you to our speakers today. Joining us from SugarCRM, we have David Campbell, VP of Product Marketing, and as a special guest, we have Adrian Swinscoe, Customer Experience and Service Advisor, Forbes contributor, and best-selling author of Punk CX. David, Adrian, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I am now handing it over to you, David. Let's do this.
Great, thanks. That was an awesome introduction, by the way, Belén. Really appreciated it. I'm going to get a big head with that. So, awesome. I'm glad to be here. This is going to be a great conversation, and thank you very, very much for tuning in. The way we really must begin, Adrian, you're going to have to tell us a little bit more about Punk CX. Now, I'm a big music fan, and that instantly gets me. But what I think people really want to know was, what is it? And why do we need more punk thinking than ever before in customer experience?
Well, so first of all, thank you, David. Thank you to Belén for the introduction. Thank you to everybody at SugarCRM for asking me to kind of participate in this. But yeah, let's get down into this Punk CX thing. So it started a little while ago. Actually started in a pub called the Basket Makers in Brighton, where I currently live, with a friend of mine called Oshin back in 2017, where over a few pints of Guinness, we were talking about the state of customer experience. And I think what drunks call a moment of clarity, I was expressing my frustration with the state of the experience space, i.e. there's all this activity and enthusiasm and investment, but not from what my perspective, I wasn't seeing a massive and significant improvements in customer outcomes, as it were. And so I was like, I wish somebody would do something a bit more punk. That kind of is quite natural to me because I'm a fan of punk. Now, I'm not old enough to be an original punk, but I'm more of a post-punk sort of guy. Probably as a result of the alcohol, I probably forgot that for about 6 months. And then it popped back into my head in 2018. And I was starting to think about it. And it made me think about where punk came from. The punk exploded out the back of prog rock or progressive rock in the 1970s. Now, progressive rock, whilst it was popular and liked by many people, it was also accused of being overly elaborate, kind of all about its technical kind of, virtuosity and things like how many kind of notes you can play on your guitar, how many synths can you play kind of like simultaneously, all that sort of stuff. And punk was like saying, actually, those things are real barriers to entry. And punk said, well, actually, everybody should be able to do this. And they explored out the back of it, this DIY, democratic, all heart and emotion approach to things. And it struck me, because prog rock was also accused of being sometimes in danger of disappearing up its own arse, as it were, and more interested in itself than its kind of fans and everything else, that struck me that, oh my God, you could make an argument that says customer experience is exhibiting some of the same characteristics, like overly complicated, certified benchmark metric, all of that sort of like stuff, and becoming more interested in itself as a thing rather than its constituents as customers. So it made me think, oh, that if that's true, then what would a punk version of CX look like? And so in a way, what I started exploring was this almost like a deconstructed idea of what it might mean and what it was going to take to push boundaries and to dare to be different and to think differently in order to make a difference and to deliver better outcomes. So that's where punk comes from. It's very close to my heart, but I call it like it's like a manifesto or a catalyst, and I call it a visual slap in the face for the customer experience industry, because the book, like this, as it currently stands, it's like a manifesto. It's all color. It's not like other things, but it's there to incite people to do better and different things.
Love it. That is really, really awesome. And I even built a prop here to show my support. So today in customer experience, One of the things I read from your book is that going forward, we expect to see kind of an increased focus in customer loyalty and retention. Can you talk about a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so not just kind of like agitating for kind of like different things to happen. I'm also kind of paying attention to what's actually going on and some of the trends and things. And so I think over the course of 2020, we've seen some massive changes. There's kind of massive shift to digital, and people have been doing very different sort of things. But there's some key things I think that have come out of that I'd like to share with you. One is that I think we've been able to achieve way more than we thought possible over 2020. But it's moved us from sort of here up to here in terms of a level of cadence, as it were. And therefore, I think maintaining momentum going forward is going to be absolutely kind of key, because if anybody drops off, I think they're going to get left behind. So it's almost like this is the new reality in terms of that pace of change. But on top of that, I think the things that are coming out of it is with that on the back of this massive switch to a shift to digital, is that from a customer's perspective, they are seeing, they don't think about, oh, I've tweeted you here, I've emailed you here, I've called you kind of here. They're not thinking about multiple conversations, they're thinking about one. And I think that many organizations are starting to catch up with that right now. And we're seeing the emergence of this and the growth in this conversational customer service space. And I think it's going to be really crucial, really important that people kind of step into that kind of as quickly as they possibly can. But on the back also of the pandemic and its impact, is that I think we're seeing lots of economies that are also inflated by a lot of fiscal stimulus kind of right now. As things wind out, we're going to see, I think, a pinch around aggregate demand. And that will kind of, what it will mean is we'll see like an economic tightening, and therefore competition is going to go up as well. Now, if you couple that with some behavioral shifts that are going on from a customer's perspective, where customers have aligned themselves with brands more generally, that have shown themselves to be helpful, valuable, and informative at the time, that organizations want to capitalize on that. They need to then focus on building retention and loyalty rather than actually trying to sell their way out of kind of this economic pinch that's coming. So that if they double down on their existing customers and how they can build retention and loyalty, that should be their kind of primary growth engine rather than just acquisition.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Right now, in today's economy, for many companies, any kind of growth opportunity that they have is going to be predicated on being able to upsell or cross-sell to their existing customer base. And so retention and loyalty are going to be key to survival, but then they're also going to be the catalyst for growth when we get into a recovery situation. So totally agree. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the survey and the report that results.
The exciting bit. Let's get into the report and the data.
Because reports are the most punk thing in the world.
Well, I tell you what, the most punk about it is not the report, but actually some of the stuff that comes out, because you're like going, if it's the thing that goes, what?
Big time.
That's the kind of the punk thing.
Absolutely. So our report's called the CRM and Sales Impact Report. It's available for free download off the SugarCRM website. The report's based on a blind survey of 1,000 global sales leaders across all vertical industries in both B2C and B2B. And the survey really, it focused on questions around how technology is transforming expectations, both for sales leaders as well as for customers, the obstacles that might be causing friction in sales and contributing to customer churn, and customer and data insights that sales leaders believe are needed in order to compete and win in market share. So let's dig in. I want to kind of talk with you about some of the, the big high water mark insights that came out of the report. And so one of the first ones is this one, which is somewhat alarming. 52% of sales leaders state that their CRM system is costing them lost revenue.
You know what? When you first shared the report with me, and I saw that number, I was like, 52. Oh my, it's like getting slapped across the face with like a wet fish. It's crazy, man. It's like, and how can more than half, only just more than half, but more than half of sales leaders say that their CRM system is costing them lost revenue? I mean, because we know historically that salespeople are often portrayed as not really working very well with CRM systems because they're like going, well, it's kind of, they have to do all the kind of administrative work and everything else. And that's probably true, right? It's not necessarily that aligned with what they want to do. They want to be going out and building relationships and chasing down deals and doing all those different things. And that's fair enough. They also don't fit around a salesperson's kind of life, but your data is showing that CRM systems are not being set up to help salespeople succeed, and they can't access, the right sort of the most timely data and the most relevant data. And I'm just thinking about that and going, crazy. That's crazy stuff, man.
It absolutely is. I mean, these are systems that were supposed to make lives easier, not harder. And to actually be an obstacle to revenue rather than a driver, that's a very damning indictment. So let's dig into that a little bit more, both through insight and as well as the results of the report. Half of companies said that they can't access customer data across marketing, sales, and service systems.
Again, it's like one of those things. It's like, 52%, if that's not a big enough number, kind of that goes, makes you kind of like think. It's like, and then there's another one, 50% said they can't access customer data across marketing, sales, and service. And you look at it and go, what the heck is going on? I mean, we talk about this idea about sort of siloed behavior and things is kind of getting in the getting in the way of kind of delivering great service and great experience. And you're like going, well, there you go. It's still here. It's large and kind of proud. But I guess my thing I was thinking, because you're at the coalface with a lot of this, David, you speak to a lot of clients about all this stuff, all the time. I mean, and so I'm keen to understand. I mean, I have some ideas, but I'm keen to understand is whether you've got any insight about some of the main challenges or reasons behind that kind of what looks like restricted access. I mean, what's going on there?
Yeah, so it really does come back to something you just said, which is the customer view is really distributed across multiple silos, each owned independently and operated independently by different departments, because a customer necessarily interacts with different members of an organization. And so when you're in a situation where nobody in the company has a full view of the customer, everybody loses, right? Because nobody has the one key bit. And it's actually, we at Sugar, we relate it back to three different things, really. One is around aggregation. You've got to be able to have some kind of aggregated view, consolidated view of customers, even if you are dealing with multiple systems. You have to conquer that particular issue because it's a non-negotiable customer requirement. They expect, as you were saying earlier, that they're having long-running conversations with you, and they don't care whether they're talking to different people. From their point of view, they're talking to one company. And then the second thing is you got to make sure your workers who deal with customers actually have access to that. And in many cases, they don't. And then finally, let's say you're really good at those two things. You've got to make sure that that information is actually accurate and up to date and complete. And that's a very, very tall order for businesses. It no doubt is.
I think about scenario in that kind of situation, and particularly that we're talking about, this is a sales report, and it's, and we're primarily talking about B2B sales, right? And it just makes me think of a scenario. Imagine somebody who's a salesperson who realizes that a customer of theirs has got their contract's up for renewal or something, and they pick up the phone and they go, "Hi, David, just want to talk to you about this new thing that we're going on, or your contract's coming up," and they're like going, "Okay, thanks, Adrian, for the call, but can you tell me about the complaint I've got in with your service department?" And you're like, and
exactly.
It's like that. I mean, if that isn't a problem that you feel compelled to solve, then you need to go get your head looked at.
Exactly. You're putting. It's like sending a soldier across a mine-laden field without a map, right? They don't know what they're going to run into, and that's a recipe for failure, right?
But I think also what it might do is that because of this, if you think about the incentives that are in all that sort of stuff, if salespeople know that there's a minefield that way, that kind of looking after kind of existing kind of customers, then they're going to go that way and actually just go new, because actually the incentive on the kind of retention and building loyalty is kind of like there's huge barriers in terms of data access and systems, and therefore we're going to go the path of least resistance, and it's that way, not that way. And that's just wild, man.
Yeah, that's fraught with danger, right? Because new customers become existing customers and they end up finding themselves in that minefield really quickly if you don't fix the sort of systemic problems that got them there, that got your original customers there in the first place. So let's talk about roadblocks and blind spots that are getting in the way and becoming obstacles to sales.
Yeah, I mean, because so the thing I was thinking about when it comes to this is that there's a number of things. Because I think if you take a look at the data, there's all sorts of research sources that suggest that north of like 70% of big change digital CX transformational kind of programs fail to kind of hit their targets or fail to meet their objectives. This kind of like might be some of the reasons kind of behind that. But my thinking about this is before we can actually get into some of the minutiae of it, I actually kind of makes me wonder about how systems, they're sort of not really designed to fit with the sales person's experience. And I wonder if you think that, or I'd like to get your view on it, where you think that too few organizations have a really clear vision about what sort of experience they want to deliver and what that means in terms of technology choices and data kind of like sharing kind of challenges.
Oh, I believe that's a huge contributor to this. So the best systems in the world are designed top down, right? If you as a company don't have a very, very clear understanding of what you want your customer experience to be and what you expect to achieve out of it and the major milestones along that experience that you expect customers to hit with success, then you can't really design a process to deliver it. You can't, and then you can't design technology to help support that process. You can't design the data requirements that you're going to have to actually achieve that. It all comes back to actually having a vision and a plan, and that takes sort of the organizational discipline in order to make that happen.
There's a quote that I love rather. It's called "Strategy without execution is nothing but a good idea." Nothing but a good idea. And I think that comes from Antoine Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince kind of back in the day. But it made me kind of think about kind of the execution part of it. There's some of the numbers that you talked about, and it talked about, you know, how 52% of people can like say that there is cost, the way that systems currently work is cost them revenue, which is kind of crazy. So what are you seeing about some of the executional kind of like roadblocks that you see your customers are facing that they have to get over if they're going to actually start? You know, we don't want, this number is not going to disappear overnight, but we need to start systematically shrinking it and removing the barriers one by one. So what do you think those kind of barriers are, David? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so a lot of the clients that we work with, you know, the systems that they have in place now give them really solid information about current state of their customers. They can tell you very quickly and very easily, you know, how many cases a customer has open, or they can tell you what stage in the pipeline a customer's at, and perhaps give you a good idea of how much that deal is worth. Those kinds of things that tell, you know, exactly operational state, current. What they don't have is a lot of situational awareness. They don't have solid information on how a customer got to that current state, because the systems that they have in place, they don't really save much of that information. They save a little bit of it to do the operational reports, but as a whole, they discard a lot of that historical context. And so by the time, for example, they've got a very unhappy customer who's ready to leave, they're just in reaction mode. They're barely finding out about it. They probably had no upfront, you know, leading indicators is that was going to happen, and they're just scrambling to save customers at that point. The other aspect of that is if you don't have a good historical view of customers, then there's no way to really understand where they're going to do in the future, right? There's no way to project their current path out into the future and understand what they're going to do. That's driven by many things. It's driven by not applying the technology, by not having the historical context. It's also, to some degree, we also run into clients who, you know, they've bought a CRM system or related applications that they prescribe one way of doing business, and they're not necessarily very flexible in terms of being molded to their particular business. As a result, they end up doing a lot of manual work in order to get the system to do what they really need out of it, and that ends up being a big roadblock for them.
So I guess what we need to do is we need to figure out where we're at, i.e. current status quo, as it were, And then if we understand kind of that, then we need to figure out then where we need to go from there, right?
Absolutely. It does really come back to sort of basics around strategy, tactics, and planning. It really does. So we know we're in a state where these tools aren't doing what we hope they would do. Let's talk about the cost of the status quo. So I'll just read through some of these stats here, and I'd like to get your first take on them. So the average sales rep spends about 54% of their time actually doing sales work, actually interacting with customers and trying to close deals. The rest of their time is spent doing something else. 53% of sales leaders say that the administrative burdens of their CRM causes friction for their sales team. It's slowing them down. And then half of the respondents cite inadequate training and help for them to be able to customize their CRM and get it to do what they need it to do for their business.
So there's two things that I think that jump out for me from there. Is this idea that the administrative kind of burden, the amount of time that it takes to kind of to work with the system, and then there's the kind of the support side of things with the kind of with the vendor. So let's kind of deal with kind of one at a time, or I'll give you a couple of questions and then you can get your thoughts on them. The first one is that 54%. I mean, crumbs. There's a lot of 50+% kind of numbers coming out of this report, which is like, wow, it's not 25% and 30%. It's like nearly half of people are burdened by some of this stuff. And it makes me think is when many CRM vendors are designing their product, I mean, have they created a salesperson kind of persona that they're kind of like, that they've worked out that therefore the systems they're designed to enable and facilitate and to work with that person? So that's kind of question one. And the second question is the idea about inadequate training and help to customize their CRM. That means that makes me think it's like, is there a danger that many vendors are just selling systems and then going, bye, we're off, figure it out sort of thing. And actually they need to get into their head is like, actually, we need to make our customers successful. And they haven't got that whole SaaS customer success mindset kind of nailed or dialed into right now.
Yeah, let me react to the first part of that because I actually think it plays into the second. And I think you'll maybe like this analogy. The original value proposition, I would argue, around CRM is kind of a progressive rock kind of mentality. It was really geared towards sales management. It was geared towards sales management. The idea was, hey, Mr. Sales Leader, if you get all of your reps to enter all the data they know about their customers and about where they're at with their deals into this system, then you now have a system of record where you can easily find out everything you need to know about your customers, about your processes, about where your reps are at, which sounds awesome, right? But the value of that came at the cost of the rep. The rep was then expected to enter all this information into the system, and to some extent, that's why you end up with them spending 46% of their time doing other things besides selling. That is a fundamental issue here, in my opinion.
So there's like you've actually got people that are CRMs, many CRM vendors that are actually masquerading as customer relationship management platform vendors, but actually what they really are is sales management platform vendors.
That's exactly right. And if you think about it, that 54% is sort of the punk uprising of the sales reps saying, hey, I'm going to close quota. This is overhead to me. I've got things I've got to do. And so they abandon the CRM system and they close deals rather than, doing the upkeep and maintenance of data grooming that's required for their CRM.
But like what I said, that links back to what I was saying before, is like rather than actually looking after the existing customers, they go this way because actually deals is the thing that they're naturally good at and naturally good at finding, but not necessarily kind of like doing the thing with the CRM system is supposed to be there to do, is to nurture and help manage customer relationships.
That's exactly right. And it sets up a problem for everybody who faces customers downstream of sales, right? Let's talk about customer churn. It's a good segue for it. We have some very, very interesting statistics here regarding churn. We talked a lot about how companies can't really get to the data about their customers. And as a result, they can't really keep their customers happy or calibrate their systems in such a way as to minimize churn. So once again, that 50 plus a few percentage points, 56% of these respondents said that their customer churn has increased over the last 12 months. That's really frightening in a pandemic economy, right? And it's costing them.
I mean, it's like what I was saying before, is that this imperative around needing to kind of like to double down on customer retention and customer loyalty. This is kind of here's further evidence around that. It's like there's a big leaky bucket kind of there, and the first thing you got to do is kind of try and fix those kind of leaks, and maybe some of the systemic stuff we were talking about before about the barriers and everything else, data sharing and access and things, will help kind of like try and solve some of these sort of things, because these things are outcomes of everything else, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Doubling down on new sales is definitely not the way out, right? I mean, even if it's successful, what you're doing really is just kicking the can down the sidewalk. You still have a churn problem, and today's new customers are tomorrow's ex-customers if you don't fix your churn problem. So let's talk a bit about transformation then. In your experience working with your clients, how has technology really changed the expectation of customers and sales leaders?
Well, it's fascinating. I think that technology feels like walking into a candy shop, as you would call it in the States, or a sweet shop sort of thing, or like a well fitted out garage where you've got walls of spanners and things. And people are pulling in a spanner and going, that's the thing that's going to solve my problem. And they can find a spanner and then go looking for a nut to tighten, as it were. And I think that's the problem, is we end up getting things in the wrong order. We go back to what we said before, is that people need to figure out kind of where they want to go, and then figure out what sort of data and tech they need to do to enable that, rather than the other way around, where many people are picking technology and then figuring out where they can and asking where can it help us go. And I think it's all back to front.
Oh, I agree, and I think that in our industry, we're seeing a lot of buzz and momentum around AI, and in fact, Sugar has its own plays in AI. I think one of the interesting things, customers are looking at AI, they're embracing it. They believe that most are looking actively at making investments in AI heading into 2021, but they're also rightfully concerned about some of the challenges that exist around there. One of the things that our belief at Sugar anyway is, AI has a ton of promise, but it's not a magic bullet. I mean, it requires good data quality, right? Which we know there are problems out in the industry with. Requires good quantity of data too. And if you approach it kind of in the traditional way that many vendors have approached it, it requires a huge investment, right? In terms of the software to pull it off, the data infrastructure, the AI expertise that you have to either develop or go hire. I guess there's one other thing actually too. It really requires tremendous vision. You've got to know what it can and can't do. You've got to have a vision for how to apply it to your business problems and objectives.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, and I love that quote from Paul Greenberg, who's a friend of mine, where he says, sales teams that lean into AI-powered CRM can take advantage of the lead insights and opportunity models that give them a significant competitive advantage. Absolutely spot on, providing you actually have the right sort of vision, and you've kind of knocked down all the organizational kind of like stuff that's going to facilitate kind of that. Because I think if you think about the potential of what could kind of happen, like the idea that somebody who's a salesperson is about to kind of call somebody, and then all of a sudden kind of the system alerts them like, oh, look, your kind of like customer that you're just about to call has got this kind of issue, or they've logged this issue sort of thing, and then you get forewarned, and then it makes a suggestion of some sorts about, well, here's a prediction of when this is going to get solved and how kind of what the next steps are, or what they're kind of likely to do. Then you're like going, oh, brilliant. That's really smart enablement for your kind of people, and that's just like scratching the surface. So I think there's massive power, massive possibility, massive potential with some of these kind of tools. But I don't think that AI is enough of a hammer to bludgeon down kind of all these kind of like organization and silo kind of barriers and the data restrictions and everything else. That's going to take human kind of like commitment and intervention and creativity and all of those different things to actually kind of get the organizations in shipshape to allow the systems to do the job that they can do and deliver on their promise.
I 100% agree with that. And the example that you gave of having this information kind of in context with what you're doing and having an AI be able to surface the information that you need to have this conversation with your customer, to me, when I hear that, that's a very consumer way to look at it. Like we are conditioned as consumers, to just sort of use AI out of our phone, right? We talk to Siri or Alexa, and there's sophisticated AI going on behind there, but they've made it so it's as simple as rambling off almost something incomprehensible, and it figures out what you really needed.
Sure.
We're not there yet, are we, with B2B kind of technology?
No, but we could be. That's the thing. It's like, the idea that we talk about enablement, particularly from if you think about a B2C perspective, and we talk about agent enablement and how they're serving customers and how they're getting presented with information. They're like going, so if you called in David, it'd be like, hey, David, how you doing? Oh, I can see that you've got this, this, and this. This is your kind of stuff. That, oh, I can see what your usage patterns have been about this and everything else. I see that your contract is coming up kind of here. I see that you've had these kind of issues. You want to kind of check in with all that. And you're like going, I'm then, the system is then set up to make me look smart and as if I'm clued into kind of what's going on for you. So I don't feel like I'm just going to go, I'm going to try and sell you some stuff today. It's like, I'm going to be focused on you. That's an empathetic sort of thing. It's like, I'm here to help you kind of achieve what you need to achieve. And all of those things I think are possible in the kind of in the B2B space around number of users that are active on account, usage kind of pattern data, all of that. So problems that have been logged, all these different sort of things. We just have to take that mindset over here and transplant it over here and think this is the art of the possible and this is what we should be striving for. And I think the potential and the promise is there, but not quite there yet. But I think it's there, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I think the key is embedding that technology. So it's just part of the experience of using the app as AI is the experience of using a phone, so
Sure.
that it kind of disappears. You're not in the big science project of putting together, an AI application. Instead, the vendor has worked that out for you already and is providing very specific AI-powered capabilities.
And a salesperson, kind of when they're going and doing all that, shouldn't have to go and have to root around and create all these kind of reports and everything else to kind of like go and find that and do like half a day's worth of preparation before they go and kind of like call their kind of customer. It's almost like that should be there. That would just make sense.
Yep, totally agree. Let's go to the takeaways.
Can I
First
just
takeaway,
say before we jump into this, it's like number one, we may be on the verge of a customer relationship crisis. There is no me about this. It's like one of those kind of things. It's like going, we only acknowledge when we're in a crisis when we're actually in a crisis, right? Oh, we think we might be in a crisis. Like, actually, the reality is we're in a crisis. Those numbers that we talked about kind of previously means that half, if not more than half, of many people that are using these CRM systems to try and generate kind of like new business and keep kind of business kind of in a B2B sort of space, they are having a problem. And if 50% is not a crisis, then I don't know what is. We're already here. We should just start talking about it and about how we fix it.
Totally agree. I mean, when you talk about when 50% of companies say that their CRM system's holding them back, that's a trailing indicator. They're living with the problem. They don't foresee the problem. They're living it. I totally agree. I think it's also the second takeaway of legacy CRM seems to present more problems than it actually solves. I think that's absolutely right for all the reasons that we discussed. AI showing promise, but barriers remain. I think it's really key that customers have a very clear vision for their AI, or they work with vendors that have a very clear vision for their AI and how it fits within their products. Sales professionals and leaders need more flexible and intelligent tools to do their jobs more effectively every day.
I just kind of want to say, because it's the last one about all points to the need to invest in modern, flexible, and intelligent CX platforms where data quality and AI sets are automatic. I actually think that all of those things, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all come into kind of like into view when we actually kind of acknowledge where we're really at. And you go, if we're here, then we can start to see clearly. And I think that's one of the challenges that presents people is like, do you want to see clearly? Do you want to acknowledge kind of like where we're at? And when we do, then we can start setting about plotting a way forward. Because otherwise, we're just like kidding ourselves. We're like la 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 la, wandering around kind of like blindly.
Yeah, the first step to solving a problem is to acknowledge that you have the problem, right? Okay, so with that, I think we can turn it back over to Belen and start some Q&A.
Thank you, David. Thank you, and that was fantastic. We actually received a few questions, so we could take the 4 remaining minutes to answer them. So the first question, and big one, is where and how should we start?
Okay, I'll take that one, and then Adrian, if you want to just pipe in where you feel like it would be great. So
Sure.
Where do you start? So if these statistics resonated with you and you feel like that describes your organization, I would say that there's probably a number of different problems that you could solve. It would be like in America we call it whack-a-mole, this carnival game. Or what I would suggest is don't boil the ocean. Pick 3 issues, and they don't have to be the biggest issues, but they should be impactful issues that are holding you back in some way. And just going back, looking very, very carefully at what's causing those things and taking kind of this holistic approach. Is it process? Is it technology? Is it people training, that kind of thing? And solving those. And just, if you do that, you're always moving the ball forward rather than trying to, what causes us to have inaction really is trying to bite off more than we can chew, because it's kind of overwhelming. So pick the things that you can solve and get them solved and do incremental improvement over time.
I mean, I would echo that, David. I was thinking there is a massive propensity within organizations to give themselves kind of indigestion, and I think corporate indigestion is just a thing that people, again, another thing that people get used to. We're like going, oh, we can't do small things, we have to do big things because we're a big organization. You're like, no. It's all about generating momentum and wins and things and solving little kind of problems and keeping going from there. And then you can maybe take on bigger and more significant things. But it's all about kind of getting going on that. And if you find not the biggest problems, but maybe there's something the smallest problems, but the easiest to solve, but will kind of provide the quickest kind of like real value or real impact, then that's kind of where you kind of totally start.
Maybe we have time for one last question. It says, and somehow related to the previous one. Question is, what can we do to start tackling the customer data problem?
So in my experience, data problems often originate really with process problems. There's not a process in place to collect quality data, to maintain it, to ensure that it gets where it needs to be, or to synchronize it to the places it needs to go, right? So I would work backwards and figure out, okay, what is the process that we're relying on for this data, and where are the gaps or holes in that process, and fix the process, define the process to be what it needs to be, and then use tech to facilitate, potentially enforce that process.
All right, so that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, David. It was very insightful. I hope you all find this session valuable. And before I let you go, I'd like to offer you something. If you were inspired by what you heard today, I invite you to download the complete CRM and Sales Impact Report. This is free and available in English, German, French, Italian, and Spanish. So download your copy, and I hope you enjoy the read. Thank you all again for joining. It has been an absolute pleasure to share this digital space with everyone today. Stay well, stay safe, and enjoy the rest of your day.